was caught up in ecstasy. 'Twas a day sanctified by God. There he showed me the truths of heaven, truths which all seeking him should know. How the soul made to live in freedom can reclaim its eternal right. How the night born of our delusions can be fired blazing with his love.
The voice of God calls us to awaken him. How will he find us when he comes?
Awake and ready.
And when he asks us to dedicate ourselves ever more perfectly to him, how will he find us?
Awake and ready.
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
friend, beloved God,
friend, beloved God,
great Master,
great Masters,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Sri Yukteswar,
Swami Sri Yukteswar,
our beloved Master,
our beloved Master,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
saints of all religions,
saints of all religions,
we humbly bow before thee.
we humbly bow before thee.
Give us the strength and courage
Give us the strength and courage
to follow your great example,
to follow your great example,
to live a Christ-like life.
to live a Christ-like life.
We are your children.
We are your children.
Receive us
Receive us
and grant us your grace,
and grant us your
that we may
grace,
share your blessings with all.
that we may share your blessings with all.
Oh, peace.
Peace.
Amen.
Amen.
Please have a seat.
Brother, I've a faint suspicion you and I have been led astray. Taught to drive the devil from us, we've invited him to stay. What we need is light, for you can't drive out the darkness with a stick. With a stick, no, you can't drive out the devil with a stick. Some proclaim all men are sinners, can't escape the devil's might. How their interest must intrigue him, they won't let him out of sight. What we need is light, for you can't drive out the darkness talking sin, no, you can't drive out the devil talking sin. Some of us were taught the slogan, social evils must be slain. How can anger drive out sorrow? How can passion conquer pain? What we need is light, or you can't drive out the darkness. While you hate, no, you can't drive out that devil while you hate. Brother, have you ever wondered why the darkness lingers on? If you want to greet the sunrise, let us come and face the dawn. What we need is light, or you'll only best the darkness when you love, yes, you'll only best that devil when you love.
Continue to meditate gaze uplifted to the point between the eyebrows as I read to you from Swami Kriyananda's affirmations for self-healing on this week's affirmation, moral vigor. Lack of moral vigor saps the will and makes the intellect sponge-like, ready to absorb the prevalent opinion of the times. People with good intellects often suffer from the Hamlet complex, the inability to come to any decision or to commit oneself to anything. They justify their indecision by saying, "I want to be fair to all sides." But even an imperfect action is better than no action at all. When you believe in something, stand by it. When you believe in someone, stand by him. Such loyal self-commitment is a higher law than seeing all sides. Energy is needed to accomplish anything in life. With moral vigor, all things are possible, but without it, the end of every act is failure. Now let's affirm together, first in a strong voice, grabbing the attention of the conscious mind. The decisions that I make in life
The decisions that I make in life
come from within myself,
come from within myself,
from my sense for what is right.
from my sense for what is right.
I am committed to the truth
I am committed to the truth
and to channeling it outward to the world,
and to channeling it outward to the world,
and taking it a little more softly inward but with deeper focus at the point between the eyebrows. The decisions that I make in life
the decisions that I make in life
come from within myself,
come from within myself,
from my sense for what is right.
from my sense for what is right.
I am committed to the truth
I am committed to the truth
and to channeling it outward to the world.
and to channeling it outward to the world.
And now in a whisper, bringing it into the subconscious mind, the decisions that I make in life come from within myself, from my sense for what is right. I am committed to the truth and to channeling it outward to the world. And now silently broadcasting it at the superconscious level, the point between the eyebrows. The decisions that I make in life come from within myself, from my sense for what is right. I am committed to the truth and to channeling it outward to the world. Again, mentally, the decisions that I make in life come from within myself, from my sense for what is right. I am committed to the truth and to channeling it outward to the world. And pray silently with me. Divine Mother, with every action of my will, let me express thy divine vitality, thy truth, thy perfection. Let me live to serve thee alone, or else die in the attempt. Om. Peace. Amen.
Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
Those of you who don't know, I'm Narayan, Dharma Devi, and of course we have our guest, Dr. Peter, with us this weekend. We gave a beautiful talk yesterday on your brain engineered for divinity, which we have recorded and will go up on our YouTube site. It's deeply inspiring. And we had a beautiful Kriya initiation last night. So along the lines of those two topics, fittingly the reading for today from Rays of the One Light, which are parallel passages from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, is on the promise of the scriptures. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 15, we read the famous parable of the Prodigal Son. Jesus tells of the man who took the wealth bestowed on him by his father and squandered it in foreign lands, where he fell into evil ways. At last, Repentant, he returned to his father's home. When his father saw him, he was, Jesus tells us, moved with compassion, and ran and fell upon his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. I am no longer worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Fetch quickly the best robe and put it on him, and give him a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. And bring out the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry. Because this my son was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and is found. And they began to make merry. Small-hearted human beings, identified as they are with their little egos, give exaggerated importance to any slight they receive from others. Thus they imagine God, like them, to be petty, unpardoning, and vindictive. In God's eyes, however, when human beings go astray, there is nothing to forgive. All of us are aspects only of his own self. He who made us resides in us. He is not far away from us in some far-off heaven. His call to us always is to return to our home within. The way of return is described in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter. Supreme blessedness is that yogis who has completely calmed his mind, controlled his ego-active tendencies, rajas, and purged himself of desire, thereby attaining oneness with Brahma, the infinite spirit. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om.
This reading is from Yogananda's book, Whispers from Eternity. These are a book about prayers and prayer demands. I was baptized at the font of this material world. Parental heritage gave me this body. Cloud-born rains, mountain springs, and meadow-nurtured food made me dependent on earth's sustenance. My imprisoned soul cried at last for freedom from the prison of confining flesh and solicitous maternal care. No more did I want to dwell within the fenced gardens of the senses. Yes, I cried for freedom. Then at last, the cloud of silence within me, holding thee remote, burst, and thy mercy rained upon me, cleansing me with thy grace. The rising waters of thy spirit broke the narrow boundaries of my soul, baptizing me in thy expanding waters of infinity. The power of thy flood of cosmic consciousness broke the embankments of my senses, and every little bubble of my consciousness dissolved, to be baptized in the waters of thine omnipresence. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the election that occurred this week. The last few months have been a pretty turbulent time, very hard to avoid reading and hearing about it, and many people are just commonly talking about it. I know in my medical practice, since the election, virtually every patient I saw had some comment to make about what had happened. And it was very interesting to me. I think the far and away the most common theme throughout was surprise. Whether they were happy or unhappy with the result, or not particularly interested, they were still somewhat surprised at how things turned out.
one of the things that this really made me think about is what should we as devotees be thinking right now? And how should we approach the future? Well, I think the first thing to comment on is to remember that, you know, the world has its own arcs of history that happen. There, as Master would say, mass karmas that affect the entire planetary consciousness and the behaviors of men and women. And for a lot of that, we have really no control. We're a little bit more like a passenger on a train. And we may be upset if we get put in one of the back cars, or if somebody closes the window right next to us, or we're seated next to somebody who's eating nothing but garlic and pesto. But we're still on the train. You know, if I was going to make a suggestion to any devotee about how to think about the election and work with it over the next week, I would say this. Just take this as my little prescription. If you're someone who was upset with the results, unhappy with the results, or not particularly interested in the whole thing, or kind of mildly disgusted with the whole process that happened, I would say every time you meditate for the next week, make sure you take some time and pray for our new leadership. For better or for worse, they're stuck with an awesome responsibility. I think for most of us, there's very little we can do practically to affect what will happen, but the masters can. You know, it's a very curious thing. I don't know how many of you have heard about what Master had said about what happened during World War II, when Hitler was running rampant through Europe, had conquered Poland, conquered France, and actually Britain was very concerned about being taken over by the Nazi forces. They were being bombed into obliteration. They were almost out of fighter aircraft. And America was not in the battle yet. And historians, when they talk about this period that are familiar with it, really emphasize the fact no one had any idea that this was going to turn out well for anybody but the Germans conquering everyone. The Germans at that point had a peace pact with Russia, so they agreed with them, we'll have normal trade, we won't attack you, you won't attack us, and we're just going to be in our little battle over here with everybody else, but we're going to leave each other alone. And Stalin and the Russians actually obeyed that. And fortunately for us, the great masters put a thought in Hitler's mind to attack Russia. I mean, that sounds like, oh, how would yogis suggest that they do something awful like attack Russia? It was terrible for Russia. But what it did was it took Hitler's attention, split it between two fronts, and suddenly the war became winnable. And in the end, really in just a few years, they were defeated. And they've become just a chapter in history, really where we can look at and learn something from it. But the real key in this was divine intervention. So I think for all of us, that's what we should remember. It's so easy to get hooked on reading the news and thinking that being informed or knowing more or having all the right talking points, that somehow that makes us a better person. And you know, it's an interesting thing. I read this article in one of my behavioral health journals several years ago, and it was looking at what kind of news do people tend to read. And what they found was people tend to read news that supports their current worldview. So the tendency when we are left with lots of different news sources to read is we tend to pick out things that agree with what we already think. And actually it tends to make us more isolated and more rigid in what we think. Rather, you think, well, if I know more news, I'll have a broader perspective. And in fact, it was just the case. The people who tended to read more of just their point of view or their way of thinking. And it actually tended to make them a little more siloed or a little bit more walled off from other people. So First part of my prescription here is read less news. In fact, I must admit, after I read that article, I cut my news reading back by about 80% because I realized most of what I was reading was just reinforcing things I already knew. And I ended up reading a lot more of my scientific journals, which was probably the right thing anyway. So that's number one, read less news. Certainly, it's safer to read something that tends to be a little more objective and doesn't have a lot of passionate, inflammatory content. I tend to find I'm safer reading news articles rather than watching video news, just because people weigh in with their own energy, and it's a little bit safer. But I'd say even for written news content, be modest, be careful with it, and just remember, particularly for the next 3 or 4 months, yes, read enough to be informed, but don't go deep in the issues because it's not going to really affect anything, and it will only make you pulled off center, and that will not help you spiritually. So, second part of the prescription is, if you're someone who was upset with the result or kind of just bored or disgusted with the whole thing, do pray for the leadership. And I would do that at every meditation, whether you like the people or not. Just say, I know these people have an awesome responsibility, and please guide their thoughts, guide their thinking. You know best for what needs to happen, what the outcome needs to be. I trust you, God. I leave this in your hands. And suddenly you can let go of yourself. Let go of it yourself and not feel that somehow if you don't have your thumb on the scale, that things won't balance out. At this point, I don't think God needs our help that way. I think we can help everyone by being positive and upbeat and being a source of light and joy so that others are buoyed by that. Because again, this is a time of turbulence and surprise for people. How about if you're someone who was actually very happy with the result? Well, I would give you a prescription too. I would say, find someone who has been very upset by what's happened because they feel somehow this is going to affect them very negatively, or they were very committed to a different outcome. And it's really been troubling and upsetting for them. And my prescription would be, is take some time, sit down with them, and ask them, how are you feeling? Tell me about this. What has this been like for you? And listen. Let them say everything. If you feel like they've got more to say, but they haven't said it all, say, is there anything else? I really would like to hear everything. Let them tell everything to you. Don't contradict them. You may have 10 things in your mind where you can say, well, I got that wrong, and oh no, that was shown to be wrong, and where did they hear that? That's just flat out not true. They're making that up. Just no. Hear them out, and at the end of it, say, I am so sorry this has been hard for you. And I just want you to feel that I really get how you are feeling right now. Open your heart, be kind with them. Don't tell them anything about how you voted or what you think. Just share with them empathetically and kindly. I know it's very interesting because having seen all these patients this last week, it's no matter what I thought, I ended up feeling quite a lot of compassion for everybody, no matter where they were on the scale, because everybody was upset by this. They might be upset in a good way. They would say good. They're really happy about the result, but it's clearly thrown them off center, and somehow they think that the world will be better because of a political change. You know, the truth is, if you look at the large arcs of history, they really end up being pretty neutral in the end over long periods of time. And like I said, we're more like passengers on a train, and much more important for us to pay attention to how we are doing in terms of our spirit and our inner spiritual search. And this other stuff, yes, once it's done, once it's happened, better that we look to the future and make sure that we're continuing to work on ourselves and helping other people. You know, the reading today was on the parable of the Prodigal Son. And this is one of my favorite stories in the Bible, because in essence, it's really a story about the devotee who is born, whether man or woman, and goes out in life, and we're given these healthy bodies or good talents or maybe some money or happy experiences, and we go out and spend it, and at some point we realize life is not perfect. We begin to have painful experiences, and at some point we begin to realize, this is kind of a rigged game out here. Some things are good, some things are bad, but boy, it is really painful sometimes. And often it is that pain that motivates people to want to look inwardly and to have more of a spiritual focus. I remember talking with Swami about this and asking him, why is it that it seems people have to have painful experiences before they want to be serious about the spiritual path? And he says, well, as long as people are comfortable and think they're happy, they'll put up with a lot. It's when the pain becomes great enough that they realize they have to look for a unique solution, something that is inward, looking for something that is present deep inside themselves. It actually reminded me when I was in college, I had a little study carrel or place I would always study in the library. And a whole bunch of people had written little things on the wall of the carrel, and I probably never even looked at them. It was just a little office space that I had. And I remember one day I finished doing some studying, and I looked up, and one of the little things that had been written, someone had written there, that which is most painful, we learn the most from. And I kind of went back to studying, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, and that's true, that when we have painful experiences, the really painful ones, we learn a lot, we grow a lot from them. And I looked up again to look at it, and I noticed that somebody had written an arrow way over the side, so I kind of followed the arrow. And then they'd written, if this is true, I must be a genius by now. Kind of reminded me, I remember my father, who had quite a good sense of humor. Whenever we'd be out somewhere and, you'd buy a toaster or something, it seemed like everyone would give you a little questionnaire, how much money do you make, what kind of work do you do, did you go to college, where did you go to college, those kinds of things. And when he would come to the line where it said college, he would always write hard knocks. As in life experience, hard knocks. And I think he did it, and he never said anything to me. I'd see him do it, and I kind of go, because I got he was doing something humorous. And I'll never forget once I was with him, and he turned it into someone, they actually read it, and they said, oh, you went to hard knocks. And she had this kind of odd expression on her face, and she said, is that in Tennessee? Fort Knox. But the story of the Prodigal Son is really one of great hope and great promise. And that's what we should remember. We're all God's prodigal sons and daughters. We go out into this life, and at some point we remember, hopefully it's early in life, but it will happen when usually it's become painful enough that we're forced to look for something different. And it's at that point that God's there waiting. He's always been waiting. He's just waiting for us to turn around and pay attention to him. And the moment we do, we get showered with all these gifts. And the little story in the Bible, it's things that people could really relate to. A ring for the finger and a nice robe and lots of fatted calf, whatever that is. But the truth is, God gives himself to us. He offers us himself if we ask for it. And he is patient. If we sort of get bored with this whole process of spiritual development and decide we want to go back and play in the world, he'll let us do that. It's not like he says, wait, come back. It's more like that. And the truth is, I think many people find this particularly when they're first on the spiritual path, they really feel that the world kind of pursues them a little bit. when they make this first turn toward being on the spiritual path, they'll often find that things that had enmeshed them in the world previously sort of trail after them. I remember when I had first moved to Ananda and really made a commitment that I wanted to make the focus of my life, being a spiritual person and having my whole life revolve around my spiritual search. I've been there, about 2 months. This was way back in 1978. And I remember I got a phone call from one of my old college professors, and he said, Peter, I just thought of you. One of our Fulbright grants got turned down. And it's, as you know, it's a very prestigious grant. And we don't have anybody to give it to. And it will be 1 to 2 years, all expenses paid. You can go anywhere in Europe, but it just has to be in the field of chemistry. That was my major, was chemistry. And he said, they're asking me to find somebody. And I thought of you. I thought you'd probably come up with something interesting. Do you think you could come up with a project you'd like to do for 2 years in Europe? And it'll be funded. And he said, I don't think they really care what you do, but it's got to be in chemistry. And boy, that was tempting. There's a little bit of a, travel bug in me. I thought, God, I could go to Europe, do all this traveling. And he actually started talking that way. He said, gosh, if you're in Europe, you can travel. Again, you're not going to have to really produce very much for this. They're just going to be glad they have somebody to give the money to. And it was very interesting. It only took me a few minutes. By the end of the phone call, I actually was able to say no. I'm actually doing something else now that I'm committed to. I didn't have to explain all that to him. But I just thought about that, how interesting that out of the blue, the world would come chasing after me like that and kind of offer me something that just sounds almost too good to be true. And it really was true. And there it was, just sort of grasping after me. And I'm glad that the longer we're on the path, usually that grasping becomes less furtive and less powerful. I'd just like to close with saying, remember our greatest bulwark, the greatest rampart we have against getting drawn into the tumult of the world is our meditation. And if you're not already meditating regularly, meditate at least once a day. 15 minutes. We actually have good scientific evidence that echoes what the masters have said, that even if you meditate 15 minutes a day, you get tremendous amounts of benefit. Most of the benefits you get from meditation, you get out of even just this first 15 minutes. It's better if you meditate twice a day for 15 minutes or more. If you haven't had a chance to take Kriya Yoga, take Kriya Yoga. It is incredibly powerful for helping you be truly centered in yourself. You begin to know who you are as a soul, and then all this tumultuous world around us, this stuff that is so upsetting for other people. One moment they're elated because their sports team won, then they're upset because their politician lost, then they're happy because they got a new job, then they're unhappy because their spouse is unhappy with them because they're spending too much time on politics and sports. So I would just like to leave it that if you are meditating regularly and have not taken Kriya Yoga yet, take it. Get started soon. I think when I ask devotees who've been on the path for a long time if they have any comments for new people, for people that are just starting on the spiritual path, one comment they often volunteer is, I wish I had started sooner. If they started at age 27 or age 35, I wish I could have started at age 12. Well, it was the right timing for them to start the age they did. I think that's part of God's plan for us. But the second thing is that often we find that people will not put as much energy into their spiritual practices as they probably should. And as the years go by, they realize, boy, I spent a lot of time on the spiritual path where I could have made a much bigger effort without too much trouble, and I didn't do it. So that's just kind of a word to keep in mind right now. This is a perfect time to increase your sadhana. This is a perfect time to sort of say, all right, there's a lot in the news right now. Probably if I read it, I'm just going to be reinforcing what I already think. So maybe I'll just scan the news today just so I know what's happening. And I'll leave it at that. And I'll spend the rest of my time reading something uplifting and actually doing all my meditation techniques today. So it's been wonderful being down here with everyone, and I just want to say, may God bless us all.
Lord, may we serve you all our days, ever rejoice to sing your praise, as we together your wisdom seek. Charge us with truth whene'er we speak. Lord, may we ever know your will. Come to us when our hearts are still. As we do guidance with joy receive, may we as one your bliss achieve. Lord, may we serve you all our days, ever rejoice to sing your praise.